Friends, in this series on lectures on Mahabharata, I am going to speak on Vedic ritual and Mahabharata. There are some references to Vedic rituals in the archaic epics, namely Ramayana and Mahabharata. Today, I am going to make an attempt to point out some discrepancies in these references from the point of view of Vedic ritual texts. Two claims are made in connection with these archaic epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata. First, they were composed by Valmiki and Vyasa respectively, who are supposed to be Brahmanas. Moreover, these two epics have been claimed to be Smriti texts in Indian tradition, and being such, they are authoritative, next only to the Vedas. For a student of history of Vedic and post-Vedic literature, both these claims will appear to be not trustworthy. From the point of view of the history of literature, the archaic epics belong to Sudha tradition. Much of these epics was transmitted from generation to generation by wandering bards, monks, and public narrators, some of whom may be learned Brahmanas, or rather semi-learned Brahmanas. In any case, these people cannot be said to be academicians or scholarly people. They were acquainted with the Brahmanism and Vedic ritual, but were not experts in these fields. Therefore, there are many discrepancies in details of Vedic rituals in these two archaic epics. I have tried to point out some of such discrepancies in this lecture. I acknowledge with thanks my indebtedness to Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute. I could get some references to Vedic rituals from the cards prepared by the scholars of Bhandarkar Institute for the Cultural Index of Mahabharata. The interpretation of these references and the conclusions about the discrepancies about the Vedic ritual in them are completely my own. Let us take the example of the Ashwamedha sacrifice performed by Rama in the Ramayana. Rama had abandoned Sita before the performance of this sacrifice. So, a golden image of Sita was present at the time of the ritual. In the Ashwamedha, not one, but rather 4 wives have to carry out their ritual duties. Rama, who was very famous for his monogamy, could not, technically speaking, be eligible to perform the Ashwamedha sacrifice at all. Moreover, even his one wife was not present at the time of the sacrifice. In Vedic ritual, there is no provision of golden image of the wife in case she is not present. There is no other alternative. But the presence of wife herself is necessary. So, Rama could not perform any Vedic ritual. The author of the Ramayana was not aware of these technical details about Vedic ritual in general and about Ashwamedha ritual in particular. There are some references to Ashwamedha sacrifice performed by Parashurama in Mahabharata as well as in Ramayana. Thus, it is said that he performed 10 Ashwamedha sacrifices. Elsewhere, it is said that he performed Vajpaya and also 100 Ashwamedha sacrifices. Here, A question may be asked, how Indra did not create any hindrance in the 100th Ashwamedha sacrifice as he did in the case of the 100th Ashwamedha sacrifice of Dileepa. Moreover, even after successfully completing 100 Ashwamedha sacrifices, how Parshurama himself did not become Indra after the performance of the 100th Ashwamedha sacrifice. Elsewhere, it is said that having destroyed Kshatriyas for 21 times and then having performed Ashwamedha sacrifice, at the end of it, he gave sacrificial gifts in the form of earth to Kashyapa. Here, it may be noted that the sacrificial gifts are given at the time of midday Soma pressing and not at the end of a sacrifice. In this story of Parashurama, there are some more discrepancies. In the first place, according to the Vedic ritual text, the Ashwamedha sacrifice is to be performed by a Kshatriya king who is an emperor and who has defeated all the kings. This information is given by Baudhayana Shrauta Sutra. And this sacrifice, namely Ashwamedha, is not to be performed by a Brahmana. Parashurama, being a Brahmana, was certainly not authorized to perform the Ashwamedha ritual at all. Moreover, he was unmarried and as such, he was not qualified to perform any Vedic ritual. For only a married man can establish fires and become authorized to perform any Vedic ritual. The physical presence of the wife of the sacrificer is an essential condition for Vedic ritual. An unmarried man, a widower, or a divorcer or divorcee cannot perform any Vedic ritual. Even though Mahabharata or Ramayana does not mention clearly about the unmarried status of Parashurama, in Tulasi Ramayana, it is clearly mentioned that he was Bala Brahmachari. And there is a traditional list of 7 Chirajivins, and in that list also Parashurama's name is included. Ashwathama, Balir, Vyaso, Hanumanscha Vibhishanaha, Krupaha Parashuramascha Saptaite Chirajivinaha. Ashwathaman is mentioned in this list, and thus it is implied that he was also unmarried. In Mahabharata, it is said that Ashwathaman, among others, performed many sacrifices in which gifts were given. He is also mentioned to be performing some fire ritual in Mahabharata. And he also offered himself to a deity. The performance of ritual by Parashurama and Ashwathaman will have to be treated as discrepancies from the point of view of Vedic ritual texts. In connection with the Ashwamedha sacrifice, it has been clearly stated in the ritual text that there is no offering of omentum of horse. In Mahabharata, there is a reference to the offering of omentum of horse in the Ashwamedha sacrifice. And similarly, in Valmiki Ramayana also, there is a reference to the omentum offering. It is also said in Mahabharata that the parts of the body of sacrificial horse were offered in the fire by 16 priests. In the Vedic animal sacrifice, the limbs of an animal are offered by the Advaryu priest and not by all the priests. In the Ashwamedha sacrifice performed by Uparichara Vasu, it is said that no animal was killed. There is a reference here from Mahabharata in the 12th Parvan. In Ashwamedha sacrifice, not only a horse is killed, but numerous other animals are also killed. Although in the medieval period and modern period, some performers accepting the doctrine of ahimsa used or use to substitute the animal by flour of animal, that is pishta pashu, or ghee animal, that is ghruta pashu. There is no such provision in the Vedic text, and the Ashwamedha sacrifice done by Uparichara Vasu will have to be treated as a symbolic sacrifice and not a real one. There seems to be a discrepancy here. In Mahabharata, we read description of Bhishma. There it is said that he also performed 30 Ashwamedha sacrifices. As is well known, Bhishma was unmarried and he was also himself not a king. According to the Vedic rules of Ashwamedha sacrifice, the performer of this sacrifice should be a sovereign king and he should have 4 wives who have to carry out certain duties in this sacrifice. In that case, the description of Bhishma here is a serious discrepancy. A performer of Vedic sacrifice is expected to be having defectless body. See, for example, these details in Katyayana Shrauta Sutra, which prohibits the men who are devoid of any particular limb, those who have not studied Veda, those who are eunuchs, those who are Shudras, from the Vedic ritual performance, they are banned. The commentators, namely Karka, clearly states that a blind, lame, dumb, and deaf, etc., cannot perform Vedic ritual. However, according to Mahabharata, Dhritarashtra performed an Ashwamedha sacrifice after Pandu's victory over the kings. Dhritarashtra was blind, so he was disqualified to perform any Vedic ritual. Moreover, he himself had not conquered the other kings, so he was further disqualified from the point of view of Ashwamedha. Elsewhere, also, Dhritarashtra is said to have performed Vedic ritual in Thayers, but that is also a discrepancy. In Mahabharata, there is a reference to the Rajasuya, and there seems to be an anomaly there. Thus, we read there that he who receives the act of sprinkling of water, that is Abhisheka, at the end of the Rajasuya sacrifice is called Sarvajit, that is all conqueror. It may be noted that the act of sprinkling water, Abhisheka, is performed in the Rajasuya sacrifice not at the end of it, but rather during the performance of it. So again, this is a kind of discrepancy. Elsewhere, also we read that animals were killed in the Chaturmasya sacrifices. Actually, according to the Vedic text about Chaturmasya sacrifices, no animal is killed in these sacrifices. Chaturmasya sacrifices are Havir Yajnas or Ishtis, and in these type of sacrifices, no animal is killed. So this is also a discrepancy. In Mahabharata, Karna says that he has performed many Soma sacrifices. Since Karna was considered to be a Suta and not accepted as a Kshatriya, how can he be said to be authorized to perform any Vedic sacrifice? So the references to the ritual performed by Karna also should be considered as discrepancies from the point of view of Vedic text. Karna was not accepted as a Kshatriya, so he was not authorized to perform any Vedic ritual. There are some references to Sarpa Satra of Janame Jaya in the Mahabharata. In this context, there is also a reference to the sacrificial gifts or dakshinas in Mahabharata. It may be pointed out that there is no sacrificial gift or dakshina to be given in the sacrifices of the type called satra. See for this Satyashadashrauta Sutra. The Soma sacrifices are at times divided into three classes. One, Ekaha, that is sacrifices in which the Soma ritual is done for 1 day only. Ahina, the sacrifices in which the Soma sacrificial ritual is performed for 2 to 12 days. And the third type of sacrifices are called Satra, the sacrifices in which the Soma ritual is performed for 12 or more number of days. The longest sacrificial sessions are those in which the Soma ritual is performed for 1000 years. A 12-day sacrifice can be performed either as a Satra ritual or as an Ahina sacrifice. All the Soma sacrifices are a part of Shrauta Soma ritual for which the performers must be Ahitagnis. The word Ahitagni means one who has established three sacred fires, namely Garhapatya, Ahoniya, and Dakshina. There seems to be a discrepancy in the references to Dakshinas in the Sarpa Satra because in a Satra sacrifice, no gifts or Dakshinas are given. Moreover, a Satra can be performed by Brahmana performers only and not by a Kshatriya or a Vaishya. The reason for this restriction is that all the performances, all the performers in this type of sacrifice have to do the duties of a sacrificer as well as of a priest. Now, the work of a priest can be done only by a Brahmana. Therefore, all the performers of a sacrificial session or satra must be Brahmanas. Janamejaya, being a king, a Kshatriya, was not technically speaking qualified for performing a satra called Sarpa Satra. There is a discrepancy here also. An Ahitagni who is also expected to be one who performs numerous obligatory, that is Nitya, contingent, that is Naimittika, and optional or Kamya rituals. He is also basically a householder, that is a married man carrying out similar domestic, that is Grihya rituals with the help of a Purohita or a royal chaplain. The priests carrying out the Shrauta rituals are called Rutvijas, and the priest carrying out the domestic rituals are called Purohitas. In Mahabharata, there is a mention of a Purohita who is described to be Sarpa Satra Vidhanajna. This expression means knower of the procedure of the sacrificial session called Sarpa. A sacrificial session or Satra is a Shrauta ritual. A Purohita is connected with domestic ritual. There is a technical discrepancy in describing a domestic priest to be expert in Shrauta ritual. Of course, it can be argued that a domestic priest can also be an expert in the Shrauta ritual, just as a singer can also be a dancer or player of musical instrument. But generally, it is not so. It is quite possible that the domestic priest has been described to be an expert in the field of Shrauta ritual by the author out of his ignorance of the technical difference between these two types of rituals. I have given Above, some examples from Mahabharata and Ramayana to support my hypothesis that the authors of these two archaic epics did not know the technical details of the Vedic ritual. They have great respect for Vedas and Vedic rituals, but it is a different thing to have respect for some particular text and to have detailed knowledge of that text. As has been already said by me above, these two archaic epics belong to the Suta tradition. Sutas, the people of mixed class, generally carrying out the work of bard or chariot driver, chariot makers, or of wandering narrators, cannot be expected to be highly learned persons. Most of them know some names of Vedic sacrifices. Ashwamedha was, of course, the most prestigious sacrifice among all the sacrifices. From the point of view of a king, it was an ideal aim to be achieved. From the point of view of common people, it was a standard of comparison or upaman. The Ashwamedha sacrifice was so prestigious that even small kings may claim to have performed this sacrifice, or the bards may describe that their patron kings have performed this sacrifice even without the actual real performance. A victorious king who has defeated all the other kings and one who is the king of all the earth, that is Sarvabhauma, only such a person is qualified to perform Ashwamedha and not a small king. But in practice, everything cannot be in accordance with the textual rules only. There were possibilities of compromises in the performance of the Ashwamedha sacrifice as far as the duration of the performance, area of wandering of the horse, and the absence of ritual with sexual union of the horse and the chief queen. The very fact that Ashwamedha sacrifice was performed for the sake of publicity indicates that it was not done secretly but rather openly. Then it must be very inconvenient to perform the obscene rituals literally. This must have also led to various compromises and shortcuts. The actual performance of the Ashwamedha requires about 13 months duration. A king who has to do a lot of administration work and to spend much of his time in the harems cannot afford to spend so much time to perform tedious rituals for a very long time. All the claimants of Ashwamedha performance cannot let the horse wander all over the earth and defeat all the other kings. All these factors lead to one conclusion. No performer of the Ashwamedha might have done the ritual of the Ashwamedha without any compromise. The Ashwamedha sacrifice is therefore rather a bookish and fictitious sacrifice without there ever being an actual performance strictly in accordance with the descriptions of it in the Vedic texts. This conclusion will be inconvenient to two types of scholars. There have been many scholars who tried to interpret the Ashwamedha sacrifice from the point of view of sexual symbolism and fertility rituals. I do not deny the remote possibility of sexual acts like those described in Vedic texts on Ashwamedha at a very primitive level and also being performed secretly. The question is about the possibility of their being performed in the case of solemn Shraudha sacrifices like Ashwamedha, which is to be performed by a great king being an Ahitagni in the form of a public ritual for the sake of one's own advertisement. My answer to this question is no possibility. In that case, the writings of these scholars on the Ashwamedha sacrifice from the point of view of sexual symbolism will be considered to be redundant. The second type of scholars to whom my conclusion about the Ashwamedha being a fictitious sacrifice will be inconvenient is the one of those historians who can quote examples of coins, copper plates, inscriptions, etc., in which some kings are mentioned to have performed Ashwamedha sacrifice. For the historians, the evidences like these are very trustworthy and almost decisive. It must be, however, remembered that forged documents can be prepared by ambitious and intelligent kings or their devoted faithful servants like bards. The kings will like to get the credit of the performance of the prestigious sacrifice like Ashwamedha, and the bards will also like to praise the kings with the same type of descriptions. In any case, the documents like coins, copper plates, or inscriptions also cannot be considered to be 100% reliable. So the writings based on such evidences will also be treated as unsound. So thank you very much.